the program in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. My name is Rajesh Lake and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Ambrish Saxena.
नमस्कार। आर्थिक खबरों के कार्यक्रम मार्केट मंत्र में आपका स्वागत है। अगले आधे घंटे में हम आपके लिए लेकर आएंगे आर्थिक, व्यापारिक और शेयर बाजार की खबरें, साथ ही उन पर चर्चा भी करेंगे। प्रमुख खबरों पर चर्चा के लिए आज हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं वरिष्ठ आर्थिक पत्रकार सिद्धार्थ सिंह। सिद्धार्थ जी नमस्कार, कार्यक्रम में आपका स्वागत है।
Warm welcome, Siddharth.
हेलो। और पहले हेडलाइंस लेके मौजूद हैं राजेश लेख।
Country's GDP grows at 7.8% in the first quarter of this fiscal. At the stock markets, Sensex loses 256 points, Nifty drops 94 points. And the government allocates export quotas of non-basmati white rice to Bhutan, Mauritius and Singapore.
देश की सकल घरेलू उत्पाद जीडीपी में वित्त वर्ष 2023-24 की पहली तिमाही में 7.8% की तेजी दर्ज की गई। मुंबई शेयर बाजार के सेंसेक्स में आज 256 अंक की गिरावट दर्ज की गई। नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी भी 94 अंक गिरा। केंद्र सरकार ने भूटान, मॉरिशस और सिंगापुर के लिए गैर बासमती सफेद चावल के निर्यात का कोटा आवंटित करने का फैसला किया है।
The country's GDP in the April to June quarter grew at 7.8% year-on-year, well supported by manufacturing, which posted a growth of 4.7%. The agriculture sector registered a growth of 3.5% and the services sector grew at 9.2%. The GDP growth in the same quarter of the previous fiscal stood at 13.1%. In the core sector, the coal sector registered a growth of 8.7% in the first quarter of this fiscal. The production of cement in the same quarter showed growth in double digit, expanding 12.2%. Steel sector grew at 10.2%, but crude oil production fell 2% in the first quarter of this fiscal. So how do you view this data that has come with continued improvement in services demand and investment activity and lower commodity prices, which has spurred growth? And how do you see the unseasonal heavy rains giving a laggard effect to the monetary tightening and weak external demand?
See, Rajesh, first thing is that it's a very welcome development because the GDP data is basically on the expected lines. It was expected that first quarter GDP would be around 8%, so we are almost there. RBI estimate was about 7.9%, and this is basically fueled mainly because of the services. We are doing very well on the transport in terms of hotel industry, and so basically 50% of our GDP is services now, and the other silver lining is that manufacturing continues to be robust. It's not fallen. There was a fear that because of the interest rate tightening by the RBI to basically tackle inflation, it was widely expected that we might see a fall in our manufacturing estimates, but that has not happened. So basically it's a good, very positive for us, and the best part is that India continues to be the fastest growing economy of the world. China has registered 6.3, so we're far ahead of China or any other nations which are close to us in terms of these GDP numbers. So basically services has done well. And then other silver lining or the very big positive is the agriculture, which is around 3.5%. It's gone up by almost a percentage up. So the way the government has taken steps like productivity linked incentives we have done. RBI has also done a very very balanced act in terms of increasing interest rates to an extent where it doesn't start impacting our growth. Plus, we should also give kudos to our industry who have also kind of taken advantage of the low commodity prices, then situation in China, they have also managed to keep prices under check, and plus, as I said earlier, the steps taken by the government, the geopolitical situation. So I think manufacturing continues to be robust, and this trend should continue. We should see even there is expectation of pessimism being, some quarters that India might see a fall in GDP in the second quarter. But I think the data we are looking at currently doesn't give us any signal that we might see a very major fall in our GDP growth in the coming
other
quarter.
positive, Siddharth, that I see is the private consumption, which has grown at 6.0% as against 2.8% in January and March.
So, as you rightly pointed, Rajesh, as we are opening up, we are getting closer to the normalcy. So, we are seeing a more consumer demand. So, that's why you're seeing an increase in a spurt in services is there. But still, I think we're still not close to the pre-COVID levels. But yes, a big consumer demand and control on prices by the corporate sectors also. So, which also is indicating that this trend will continue.
राजेश, अगर हम कृषि के क्षेत्र की बात करें तो जैसा आपने कहा कि इस जीडीपी में थोड़ा सा इस क्वार्टर में थोड़ा सा बेहतर प्रदर्शन हुआ है, लेकिन जिस तरह की समस्याएं हैं, अगर हम मौसम के हिसाब से देखें, रेन्स को लेकर जिस तरह की या फ्लड्स को लेकर जिस तरह की प्रॉब्लम है, और उसके साथ साथ पॉलिसी इश्यूज़ पे देखें, जो मिनिमम सपोर्ट प्राइस है, सरकारी जो ख़रीद मूल्य है, उसको लेके काफ़ी विवाद हो रहा है केंद्र के बीच में और राज्यों के बीच में। इस तरह की जो चीज़ें हैं, उनका कितना असर आपको लगेगा एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर पे पड़ेगा?
देखिए, जहाँ तक रबी का क्रॉप है, वो तो हमारे पास अवेलेबल डेटा है, हमको नहीं लगता कि उस पर कोई बहुत ज़्यादा अभी असर पड़ा। खरीफ भी ठीक ठाक, जो बुआई है वो ठीक ठाक हुई है, और जो आप बात करें इंसेसेंट रेन्स या जो बारिश आई, बाढ़ आए, फ्लड्स आए, तो उनका इम्पैक्ट हमको दिखा, कुछ कमोडिटीज़ पे दिखा। जो टमाटर के जो प्राइजेस थी, जब पैदावार जो ख़राब हुई, तो उसकी वजह से थोड़ा बहुत इम्पैक्ट दिखा। बट मुझे नहीं लगता कि ओवरऑल कोई बहुत ज़्यादा एग्रीकल्चर जो रेंज ठीक, हम लोग मतलब अगस्त में भी, इस महीने भी थोड़ी बारिश कम हुई है, कुछ जगह डिलेड सोइंग है, बट जो एस्टिमेट्स हमको एग्रीकल्चर मिनिस्ट्री से मिल रहे हैं या जो वो एस्टिमेट्स कर रहे हैं, उसमें ऐसा नहीं लग रहा है कि कोई बहुत चिंता वाली बात है। हाँ, ये ज़रूर है कि फूड प्राइसेस थोड़ी, जो इन्फ्लेशन है, फूड इन्फ्लेशन जिसको हम कहते हैं, महंगाई खाद्य पदार्थों की, वो ज़रूर इस समय बढ़ी हुई है, और सरकार लगातार उस पर नज़र बनाए हुए है और बहुत तेज़ी से कदम उठा रही है। मुझे लगता है कि मतलब बहुत आगे बढ़कर सरकार ने इस समय बहुत एक्टिवली स्टेप्स लिए हैं। टमाटर को ही ले लें, फिर प्याज को आप ले लें, और जहाँ तक गेहूँ और चावल की बातें भी हैं, की बात भी हम करें, तो कहीं ना कहीं जो सरकार के स्टेप्स हैं, और एक बात बड़ी सरकार की क्लियर है कि पहले हमें ये इंश्योर करना है कि हमारी जो अपनी खपत है, हमारी जनता के लिए जो ज़रूरतें, पहले हम उनको पूरा करेंगे, उसके बाद ही हम इसको एक्सपोर्ट करेंगे। हाँ, ये हो सकता है कि कोई किसी देश के लिए कहीं ज़रूरत है, तो उस समय हम हो सकता है इसमें थोड़ी बहुत ढिलाई करें, लेकिन ओवरऑल एक वरिष्ठ अधिकारी जिनसे मेरी बात हो रही थी, उन्होंने बिल्कुल क्लियर बोला कि हिंदुस्तान इस साल एक्सपोर्ट मार्केट में एग्रीकल्चर प्रोडक्ट्स को लेके बहुत चांसेस हैं कि हम नहीं होंगे एक्सपोर्ट मार्केट में, बिल्कुल नहीं होंगे, क्योंकि पहले हमें इंश्योर करना है, क्योंकि दुनिया में सब जगह आप देखेंगे जियोपॉलिटिकल डिस्टर्बेंसेस हैं, उसकी वजह से आपको दिख रहा है कि कमोडिटी प्राइसेस कहीं ना कहीं हिट हो रही हैं। तो इस वजह से मूवमेंट जो है बहुत फ्लो ऑफ गुड्स बहुत आसान नहीं हो रहा है, प्रॉब्लम्स आ रही हैं। तो इसलिए ये बड़ा क्लैरिटी है सरकार के मन में कि हम एक्सपोर्ट तभी करेंगे जब हम ये पक्का इस बात को इंश्योर करेंगे कि हमारे यहाँ डोमेस्टिकली वी हैव इनफ सरप्लस, इनफ अवेलेबिलिटी एंड प्राइजेज आर लो।
लेकिन फिर भी जैसे हम जीडीपी की बात कर रहे हैं, जीडीपी में जो एग्रीकल्चर का शेयर है अभी भी काफ़ी कम है, तो इसको आपको क्या लगता है कि कौन से ऐसे उपाय होने चाहिए कि इस शेयर को और ज़्यादा बढ़ाया जाए?
नहीं, बिल्कुल आपने ठीक बात कहा, और इसके लिए शायद उपाय टाइम पे सरकार कर रही है। जैसे कि आप दालों को ही ले लें, दालों का हमारे यहाँ खपत ज़्यादा है, प्रोडक्शन कम है, इसीलिए शायद आप देखेंगे कि कुछ वेराइटीज़ ऑफ दाल पे सरकार ने एमएसपी बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ाया है। सरकार का ये फोकस है कि किसान को कि वो आए और इन ऐसी चीज़ों का प्रोडक्शन करे जहां उसको एमएसपी अच्छा मिल रहा है। तो और प्लस आई थिंक उनको जो है इंसेंटिवाइज कर रहे हैं हम, फर्टिलाइज़र सब्सिडी है ही है, हम देते ही हैं। तो और तरह की इस तरह की स्कीम्स गवर्नमेंट समय समय पे चला भी रही है फार्मर्स के लिए, और भी मतलब जितने भी वेलफेयर के काम है वो कर रही है सरकार। तो हाँ, ये ज़रूर है कि कृषि ऐसा क्षेत्र है जहाँ पे आपको शायद हो सकता है हम लोगों को कि तुरंत कोई रिजल्ट ना दिखे, ये थोड़ा एक लॉन्ग टर्म पॉलिसी, इसी के तहत आप देखेंगे ना, जो वो जब नरेंद्र मोदी सरकार आई तो उन्होंने कहा कि हम फार्मर्स की इनको को दुगना करेंगे, तो उस तरफ सरकार का ध्यान भी गया है, सरकार ने कदम भी उठाए, इसी वजह से एमएसपी बढ़ा है। शायद जो कीमतें ऊपर भी आई हैं, थोड़ा उसमें एक रीज़न एमएसपी भी है। और शायद आज जब लोग शिकायत करते हैं तो क्योंकि किसान को कुछ उसके उपज का वाजिब दाम भी मिल रहा है, तो ये बैलेंस एक है जो बैलेंस आपको बना के रखना है। तो
Okay. You did touch upon it, but I'm going to ask you nonetheless. Growth of 8 key infrastructure sectors rose to 8% in July 2023 compared to 4.8% in the same month last year. On expansion in production of coal, crude oil and natural gas, according to the data that was released. How much of this is due to the front loading in government capital expenditure?
Very important question, Rajesh. Probably I think I missed this point. Government has been, since COVID came, I think the endeavor of the central government has been to front load public spending, because private sector was lagging behind. They were shying away because they had issues like there would be probably a low demand, other issues. So from its side, since pandemic came, since COVID came, government has been on the very aggressively spending. If you look at this year's data also, the current financial year, almost 30% of capital expenditure, public capital expenditure has already been spent. Almost about, I think, almost 30 lakh crores.
If I were to give you the figures, 2,78,500 crore was spent as against 1,75,000 crore.
Yeah, so capital expenditure which you're saying, I think of that 30 lakh crore that we have budgeted, we have already done about 10 lakh crores. So we are aggressively spending, and I think plus the sectors that you are mentioning, oil, because we are very big importers and as well as very big exporters of finished oil products also. So that also is basically showing up in this core sector data that you're mentioning. And as far as government is very clear, and if you look at very recent statements of the finance minister, she has said also that we continue to push the paddle on the public spending. Now there are good signals that private sector is also getting a boost, and they are also now ready to come in and spend.
Okay. The RBI expects India to grow at 6.5%, if I'm not wrong, in FY24. So how much is the uneven monsoon, particularly the El Nino worries, affect this percentage growth that we're talking about?
See, I don't see the monsoon impact if agriculture goes back. As you rightly said some time back, you're seeing a good consumption. So if agriculture goes bad, I think that would have some impact on our consumption. So that could lead to a fall in our GDP, or the estimate that we have that we may grow around 6. But more than that, I think the worry is more on the side of China, what is happening in China, because still the picture is not that clear. And there is a large expectation that Chinese government may do some stimulus. But as of now, we haven't got any signal from them. Plus then the uncertainty, or I would say still the picture is not clear in the US also. The latest data, inflation is a little bit, it's tapered, but still, so things would pan out. A lot of all will also depend on how things pan out globally. But as far as India goes, I still feel the way things are, manufacturing is intact, our services are doing well, agriculture is on track. There we haven't seen much impact of, as far as all the estimates that we have got, that monsoon is going to have a big, very poor impact on our agriculture.
So today we are going to be reading now in a while about the Asian shares, how the markets have done. They're still reeling under the effect of gloomy China factory readings. What repercussions will that have on the Indian markets going forward, and for how long?
See, if China slows down, obviously, because it's one of the biggest economies of the world, so you would see demand slowing down, you would see commodity prices falling, corporate earnings coming down. So all that, how does it translate? Obviously, when corporate earnings go down, obviously it shows that the prices, there will be an impact on the market. So
isn't a weaker China good for India?
It's good.
manufacturing, etc.?
Obviously, that's what I said. We've taken advantage. Our industry has taken advantage of that low commodity prices, and it's also then again, if as you rightly said, you see production bases, manufacturing bases shifting from China. Apple is a big example. We are now almost one of the biggest exporters of Apple phones to US. So that's happening. But what happens is, Rajesh, we may probably talk today and we may say tomorrow again when we meet, we're not seeing the results. See, manufacturing again is a very long-term game. It will take 7-8 years for things to change. I remember 2016, Apple started showing an interest in India. And the present RBI governor was then the Secretary Department of Economic Affairs. And India was very clear. If you want to come to India, you have to set up a production base here. We are not giving tax incentives, but we will give you everything else that you want. So it has taken time. It's taken almost 6, 7, 8 years for Apple to come to India, but they have come. And now they're here to stay. And in the meanwhile, what we have done is also that we have brought in 7, 8 sectors for productivity linked schemes. And you're seeing good results. You've seen yesterday only there has been this hardware and laptop productivity link. It's showing some 32 companies have shown interest. So I think things are moving. It will take time. But India is here to stay. We will eventually be a big manufacturing base, but it will take some time. Things take time because companies have their own investment pattern. These are things which will take time.
और चलते हैं शेयर बाज़ारों का हाल जान लेते हैं। बम्बई शेयर बाज़ार का संवेदी सूचकांक सेंसेक्स आज 256 अंक यानी 0.4% की गिरावट के साथ 64,831 अंकों पर बंद हुआ। नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी 94 अंक यानी आधा % की गिरावट के साथ 19,254 अंकों पर पहुंच गया। व्यापक बाजार में बम्बई शेयर बाजार का मिड कैप सूचकांक मामूली रूप से गिरकर बंद हुआ, जबकि स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स 0.8% की तेजी के साथ दर्ज किया गया।
At the stock markets, the Sensex at the Bombay Stock Exchange lost 256 points or 0.4% to end at 64,831 today. The Nifty at the National Stock Exchange fell 94 points or 0.5% to 19,254. In the broader market, at the BSE Mid-Cap Index ended marginally lower, but the Small Cap Index climbed 0.8%. Sectorally, the utilities and the oil and gas indices were the biggest loser, declining about 1% each. The services index dropped 1%, the energy index lost 0.8%, the BankX and the FMCG index slipped 0.7% each. The power index the bar index fell 0.5% and the commodity and the financial services index shed 0.4% each. Among the advancing indices, the consumer durable index climbed 0.9%, the realty index advanced 0.7%, the industrial index rose 0.6%, and the capital goods index gained 0.4%, and the metal index inched up 0.3%. Siddharth, how do you see the markets resisting the higher levels? What's your outlook on the market, and how do you see how the markets behave today?
See, basically, if you look at today also, it has been following the trend of in the entire month. You see the markets have been volatile. If you look at the market for the last 7 months, last 5 months from March to July, I think markets were almost 14% up. And I think some bit of it is profit booking by the investors. Plus volatility is also coming today, particularly the lot of data expected, so that also kept the market volatile. There was a lot of expectation. There was some quarters expectation, pessimism that GDP may be lower than what it has been estimated. So, and in general, energy, as you said, energy index, I think the announcement yesterday, which is largely very good for people at large, that gas cylinder prices have been cut by 200 rupees by the oil companies, but it is also then it might reflect, if not compensated by the central government, that it might affect on the bottom line of the companies, of the oil marketing companies. So probably that could be a reason. And in general, if you see the high interest rates in US has also led to a lot of selling by the FIs in the month of August. So so that also is one of the reasons for the market being range bound and volatile.
So, how do you see, in light of what you just mentioned, the commentary of the India Inc.? Does it reflect caution or does it reflect confidence?
See, it is. I think this trend will continue. Probably we may see markets being range bound for some time, because till the picture gets clearer in about a 15 months, a month, because the situation in China, how US behaves, how US Fed behaves in terms of their interest rate, because now the expectation is that Fed may not go for another rate hike because inflation is kind of coming under control there. So the rise in inflation has just come, is very, very little, very minor. So all that may lead, if the Fed doesn't hike rate, obviously it's a big positive for us. We might see again inflow of money. Otherwise the US Treasury bonds become very attractive, and this being the safest in the world, so obviously the money goes out. So that all those, so we will, I think next 15-20 days the picture might get clear. Plus we also have the RBI, our own monetary policy, so the way central bank behaves. So all that we'll get a more clear picture. Until then I expect markets to be range bound. We are not expecting a very big news in terms of, or something suddenly happens big out of the G20 summit which is now lined up.
सिद्धार्थ, अगर हम रुपए को देखें तो अमेरिकी डॉलर के मुकाबले काफ़ी उसकी कीमत में कमी आई है, तो आपको क्या लगता है कौन से ऐसे कारण हैं जो हमारे रुपए को कमज़ोर बना रहे हैं डॉलर के मुकाबले?
नहीं, देखिए, अगर हाल फिलहाल में आप देखेंगे तो बड़ा सीधा सा है, जब US फेड की ये एक्सपेक्टेशन थी कि उनके रेट्स, और अभी रेट्स उनके हाई है ही हैं, तो थोड़ा बहुत वो FII आउटफ्लो होता है तो उसका सीधा इम्पैक्ट हमारे रुपए पे आता है। और अभी मुझे लगता है रुपया इस लेवल पे रेंज बाउंड है, 50 पैसे 60 पैसे इस तरह से ऊपर नीचे आता है। RBI इंटरवीन करता है, और RBI भी की भी जो पॉलिसी है वो ये है कि बहुत ज़्यादा रुपये बहुत तेज़ी से ऊपर नीचे ना जाए, एक दिन में 50 पैसे 60 पैसे इस तरह से ना तो ऊपर जाए ना नीचे आ जाए, उस मतलब एक रेंज में रहे, स्टेबल रहे। और वो इंटरवीन करते हैं अगर उनको लगता है, तो मुझे नहीं लगता कि बहुत कोई इसके पीछे कोई बहुत ज़्यादा हमको चिंता करने की ज़रूरत है। ये सब जो जैसे US में अगर चेंज है, अब जैसे आ रही है, ये समाचार आ रहे हैं कि US में फेड तो रेट शायद हाइक ना करे, तो इसीलिए हम देख रहे हैं आज रुपया कोई बहुत ज़्यादा रुपए में मूवमेंट नहीं था
जी। और चलते हैं एशिया के बाज़ारों का हाल जान लेते हैं। एशिया के बाज़ारों में आज मिला जुला रुख रहा। उधर चीन के फैक्ट्री उत्पादन में अगस्त में लगातार 5वें महीने गिरावट दर्ज की गई। राष्ट्रीय सांख्यिकी ब्यूरो के अनुसार परचेजिंग मैनेजर्स इंडेक्स PMI में अगस्त के दौरान गिरावट की गति कम हुई और इसका स्तर 49.7 रहा। जुलाई के दौरान यह स्तर 49.3 था। गैर विनिर्मित वस्तुओं का PMI इस महीने 51 रहा। यह जुलाई के 51.5 के मुकाबले नीचे रहा। गैर विनिर्मित वस्तुओं के PMI ने सेवा और निर्माण से संबंधित व्यापारिक गतिविधियां शामिल हैं। जापान में टोक्यो शेयर बाजार का निकेई 0.9% बढ़ा, जबकि सिंगापुर के स्ट्रेट्स टाइम्स इंडेक्स में बढ़त 0.4% की रही। चीन के शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स और हांगकांग के हैंगसेंग में गिरावट 0.6% की रही। दक्षिण कोरिया का कोस्पी इंडेक्स 0.2% गिरा। इस बीच चीन के सबसे बड़े निजी प्रॉपर्टी डेवलपर कंट्री गार्डन ने चेतावनी दी है कि यदि उनका वित्तीय प्रदर्शन लगातार गिरता रहा तो उसे अपने देय भुगतान में समस्या आ सकती है। इससे पता चलता है कि चीनी अधिकारियों द्वारा इस क्षेत्र को संभालने के लिए जो भी प्रयास किए जा रहे हैं उनका ज़्यादा असर नहीं हो रहा। यूरोप में दिन के कारोबार के दौरान लंदन के फुट्सी में मामूली बढ़त दिखाई दी, जबकि चीन के डेक्स में 0.6% की तेज़ी दर्ज की गई। फ्रांस के कैक में मामूली गिरावट देखी गई।
Siddharth, do you think this piecemeal support measures that the Chinese authorities are giving not enough to engineer a turnaround in the critical real estate sector?
I think what you're saying is a lot of people are circumspect, because what people are saying that you need a well-rounded stimulus, and currently what they're doing is, I think now there is also a talk that there would be some they would be reducing the interest rate for the current borrowers of home loan borrowers who are there. So there is an expectation that banks may cut rates for the existing borrowers also, which may fuel some demand for them some consumption may go up in the Chinese economy. But I think and the biggest problem with them is that still there is no clarity what actually is happening in China, lack of the what information. So I think we'll have to wait, but yes, one thing is clear, all this is not going to help China. China will have to take a well-rounded steps.
Okay. And on the Wall Street yesterday, key indices ended higher as a slew of disappointing economic data raised the probability that the Federal Reserve will press the pause button on its effort to rein in inflation. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 38 points or 0.1% to end at 34,890. The S&P 500 rose 17 points or 0.4% to close at 4,515. And the Nasdaq Composite added 76 points or 0.5% to 14,019. Very briefly, does the weak economic data good news for the interest rates as it could give the Federal Reserve a rationale for letting key interest rates pause at the next month's monetary policy meeting?
Absolutely, because and now it is almost being given that US Fed may not increase the interest rates at their next meeting, and which is a big positive for countries like India, because otherwise it also puts pressure on our central bank to raise interest rates so that the flight of capital doesn't happen. So otherwise FIIs just go out. So I think it's a big positive for us.
और केंद्र सरकार ने भूटान, मॉरिशस और सिंगापुर के लिए गैर बासमती सफ़ेद चावल के निर्यात का कोटा आवंटित करने का फैसला किया है। भूटान 79,000 मीट्रिक टन गैर बासमती सफ़ेद चावल भारत से ले सकेगा, जबकि सिंगापुर के लिए यह मात्रा 50,000 टन तय की गई है। मॉरिशस भारत से 14,000 टन गैर बासमती सफ़ेद चावल ले सकेगा।
So that's again a good step, because you're looking at your interest first and then you're looking at others.
Yeah, and this is more of a diplomatic gesture that we do to the countries, the partner countries, because I think there's something always in return from the other side also. And this is not a big quantity. So this is not something, a commercial transaction which is happening. This is just a country-to-country diplomatic gesture.
Moving on, the global crude oil prices rose today, boosted by a large decline in US crude inventories and production cuts by OPEC+, but a slowdown in China's manufacturing activity limited gains. So the crude oil futures for October gained 45 cents to trade at $86.31 a barrel. The US crude oil futures for October moved up 29 cents to trade at $81.29 a barrel. US government data on Wednesday showed the country's crude inventories fell by a larger than expected 10.6 million barrels last week, depleted by high exports and refinery runs. Where do you see, very briefly, the oil prices going? It's good for us that they remain low.
Yeah, Rajesh, very difficult to predict, but yeah, oil prices is something I think nobody is able to predict correctly. But yes, currently I think we are seeing them being at the current level. I hope they remain at the current level, or they come down, because otherwise it becomes difficult for the Indian economy. Already we are fighting a high inflation. So if oil prices go up, I think it will be difficult for us. And the current prices, I think the oil companies are still able to make some profits. They have registered good April-June profits.
और दिल्ली सराफा बाज़ार में सोने का भाव 150 रुपये उछलकर 60,250 रुपये प्रति 10 ग्राम पर पहुंच गया। चांदी 77,500 रुपये प्रति किलो पर बनी रही। अंतर्राष्ट्रीय बाज़ार में सोना $1,945 प्रति औंस पर रहा, लेकिन चांदी का मूल्य $24.53 प्रति औंस पर दर्ज किया गया।
Siddharth, thank you so much for being with us and answering all our queries related to the market and the economy. And before we close, the headlines once again. Country's GDP grows at 7.8% in the first quarter of this fiscal. At the stock markets, Sensex loses 256 points, Nifty drops 94 points. And the government allocates export quotas of non-basmati white rice to Bhutan, Mauritius and Singapore. That's all we have in this edition of Market Mantra. Till tomorrow, goodbye.
Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra.
This is Akashvani, the news read by Ramya. A special session of Parliament has been convened from the 18th to the 22nd of next month. The session will have 5 sittings. Parliamentary Affairs Minister Prahlad Joshi